Welcome, everyone. I'm Cantor Vicky Glicken of Temple Emanu-El, and we are so grateful that you are taking the time to study with us this afternoon. We are fortunate to have Dr. Charlotte DeCoster with us. She is the Ackerman Family Director of Education for the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. An experienced educator, she has researched, taught, and written on Holocaust history. She holds a PhD in history from the University of North Texas. Dr. DeCoster regularly speaks on the Holocaust, children and child rescue during the Holocaust, and in Nazi Germany. She has traveled throughout the US to give talks on Anne Frank and child rescue during the Holocaust. And we are so grateful that, Charlotte, you're with us today. We look forward to your learning. And without further ado, just one additional encouragement for anyone who's in a place where you do feel comfortable turning on your camera to please do so. And we will turn things over to Charlotte. And thank you for being with us today.
am going to share my screen right away. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I first want to start with thank you to Tal and Cantor Glicken for the amazing partnership and inviting us to share some of the history and talk about this very important topic about defiance and that intellectual cultural resistance at Terezín. It's such an important topic and so important to highlight the different ways of Jewish resistance as well during the Holocaust too. So today I'm going to share a presentation with you, and I think the best way to learn about history and to kind of connect with the history too is to look at images. So I tried to um, in my presentation put a lot of key images in there that you might not be as familiar with if you've studied a little bit of Holocaust history or Terezín history. Some of them are key images because they're still really important for us to look at and talk about and think about. But I wanted to show some other sites too that are frequently not portrayed in Holocaust history or that we don't see as often. The reason I wanted to bring that visual element and that PowerPoint with it is because it is so unique to the history of Terezín, of Theresienstadt, because of the uniqueness of the camp. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in my PowerPoint. So that's why I wanted to share with you that I'm going to share a PowerPoint with a lot of images in there if you have any questions. And this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg of images that are out there that you can look. At the end, I'll leave some resources if you want to go look more at images, musical pieces. So many lectures are out there still too. There's so much from Theresienstadt left that you can look at. And so I left some of those resources at the end of my presentation as well. So you can take a picture of it and then you can go through all of those resources too. Today, I also wanted to start with saying I'm going to be using the word Theresienstadt in my presentation. Although I have Terezín, which is the actual town, it is the Czech name for the town that the Theresienstadt camp is located in. I'm going to be using the word Theresienstadt today because that is the name of the actual camp, ghetto, the location that we're going to be talking about during the Holocaust. And that is important is because it shows an element of that Nazification in language too, when we talk about these memorial sites and in it. So I'm not talking about Terezín the town or Terezín the memorial site today. Today I'm really going to be focusing on Theresienstadt the camp during the Holocaust. And so that's why I'm going to be using the word Theresienstadt today with that. And I just wanted to clarify that before I got started today. Also, hi, I talk a lot. I see some of our docents are on here too that help us at the museum and share this information about Theresienstadt at the museum too. So those who are familiar, They know that I invite questions throughout. I'm going to use both the Q&A button, but if you're not familiar with the Q&A button, you're welcome to use the chat too. But if you can, if you want to use that Q&A button, and I'll regularly look at that question list to see if I can cover some questions as we're going. So if something comes to mind and you want to ask that question right away, you don't have to wait till the end, but I'll make sure there's some time at the end too to cover some questions too. But if you want to ask it in the moment, feel free to do so, because I know sometimes when we're looking at a lot of stuff, it's easier to ask the question in the moment. So feel free to use that Q&A as well, or if you want to share something too, feel free to share that Q&A. That's the primary one I'm going to be used, but I'll check the chat once in a while as well. Okay, I hope everybody's ready to get started. I wanted to start kind of this journey about learning about Theresienstadt with a timeline, the Terezín timeline. And here I called it the Terezín timeline because the journey of Theresienstadt starts in the town of Terezín. It doesn't start with a camp, right? It actually starts with the region. And the history of Theresienstadt is very complex. And the timeline is very complex. So I wanted to kind of build a historical timeline framework for us to understand how these events, in what order they kind of take place. Because if you're a little bit familiar with the history of Theresienstadt, you've heard about the Red Cross visit, you've heard about some of that intellectual, the spiritual, the artistic resistance. You've heard maybe that it's a camp and it's a ghetto and it's a transit camp, all of these different things. But in what timeline does that kind of fit? Because that is really important to understanding what the pull and push factors are to the Jewish resistance within Theresienstadt. Unfortunately, that resistance is not separate from the push factors. And one of these push factors is the actions of the Nazis and how they built that framework. The pull factors is the realization also of what the Nazis are doing, the impact and what the end goal is of the Nazis too, especially as we go through that timeline. We near that Red Cross visit, and we're going to see changes with that resistance happening and how that resistance builds with that. So that's why I want to start with the timeline first. Part of that timeline is first the annexation, right? In March of 1939, the Czech provinces of Czechoslovakia or Bohemia, Moravia, those Czech provinces in which Terezín, the city, is located, are annexed to Germany. And so now they become under the Greater German Reich, this great German empire that the Nazis are building. Terezín falls under this. And that's where the journey starts, because now this area becomes Germified, becomes Nazified. And we now switch from Terezín to Theresienstadt. And with that, Terezín really disappears from the map, right? It now becomes a German town in which a camp will be built. And that's 39, right? Then we fast forward 2 years. And at this point, it is really Heinrich Heydrich as leading for Himmler, the SS, who comes up with this plan of building this establishment, this settlement that will become Theresienstadt. And the original ideas are being formed with that. And then very quickly, once Heydrich comes up with the plan, in October, we're going to see the construction start of this resettlement that will become Theresienstadt. And the arrival of Czech prisoners starts with that, because they will be building the camp. The infrastructure, so it is a fortress before, but the infrastructure that is being built for it to be a resettlement camp will be built by these original Czech prisoners, these Jewish Czech prisoners who will be arriving. With that, very quickly, this structure of what will become Theresienstadt starts forming with the appointing of a Jewish Council of Elders, an Judenrat, that is formed at Theresienstadt. And this is where we see the shift happening. Is this a campus? Is a ghetto? I'll talk about that in a little bit again. Then the real first big deportation starts happening in 1942. This is mainly of Czech and Slovak Jews. who are going to enter. Up until June of 1944, mainly the prisoners are Czech Jews who are at Theresienstadt. It is in June 1942, which is a key date, right? It is at the height of when Auschwitz, Birkenau starts opening, the death camps are opening, the Einsatzgruppe are murdering in the east. It's when the big mass executions, the big mass murder of Jews is happening, that the first German and Austrian Jews start arriving at Theresienstadt. And then the Judenrate is expanded with adding in German and Austrian Jews as well. Soon after that, Dutch Jews start arriving as well. A lot of times we only talk about German and Austrian Jews and these intellectual Jews and artistic Jews that the Nazis see as these prominent that get some kind of false safety at Theresienstadt. But also Dutch Jews will arrive here. And still the main base, the majority of Jews are going to be Czech Jews at Theresienstadt. Then we're going to see the mass deportations, especially to Auschwitz, starting to start as well, in preparation for in 44 to the Red Cross visit. We're talking 44 here. That's when this Red Cross visit starts. And I want this is why I put it smack in the middle of our timeline. Because think of 44, right? Auschwitz has been, Birkenau, the gas chambers have been running for 2 years, right? Belgic, Sobibor, Treblinka, they're already closed. They've, in the eyes of the Nazis, accomplished some of their big feat, right? And now the Red Cross comes to Theresienstadt. And this is important because when we get to why is this Red Cross visit happening, it's going to have to do with those death camps. They are coming to Theresienstadt because the question is, are these death camps existing? And so that's really important. This date is really important in this larger picture of Theresienstadt. And then this Judenrate, the Nazis don't need them anymore. And so they become dismantled as well. They served their purpose after the Red Cross visit too. And slowly we see the dismantling of the settlement camp, right? Starting in September 42, the mass deportations of prisoners, some of the prisoners being sent to other areas as well, other prisoners arriving from other areas too, from Hungary as well. And the Red Cross, news of this visit is spreading. And so we see more Red Cross visits, more calls, this tango between the Nazis and the International Red Cross starts happening because Jewish pressures of that first report. And we'll look at that in a little bit as well. And in the final wave, the very last month of Theresienstadt is more than 13,000 mainly Jewish prisoners, not all, but mainly Jewish prisoners from Buchenwald and Gross-Rosen camp start arriving at Theresienstadt. The overcrowding, the impact of that is massive with it as well, eventually until the camp is turned over. And this is really important in a timeline too. I'm going to mention this now because I won't be able to get back to it at the end. But think about it, right? On April 30th, 1945, Hitler commits suicide. The end of the Nazi regime really comes, that's the end, right? He's the figurehead, he's everything. That's the end with it. On May 2nd, the SS surrenders the camp to the Red Cross, not to an army, which is really rare for a camp at this point, right? It is handed over to the Red Cross. Leo Bach becomes with that the new head of the Jewish Council. Then on May 5th and 6th, 4 days later, the SS starts leaving. And then finally, on May 9th, another 2 days later, the camp is officially liberated by the Soviet army. It's a very unique ending of a camp too, where we have these phases, and the Red Cross again plays a really important element, and the interconnection of the few remaining Jews there that have been there this long time already is very, very small. most of the Jews in this camp are these prisoners that arrived at this point from Buchenwald and Grossrosen, who have no connection to what has been going on at Theresienstadt. So I wanted to put this all in perspective, and I hope that's kind of, as we're going through this journey and talking, that this kind of puts the larger picture in connection of the Holocaust in connection with what we're talking about. The United States has a really great kind of rundown timeline that is even more detailed for that. That's what that QR code is, the Scan Me. So if you want that link, I'll put the link at the end of my presentation too. But if you want to kind of see more pictures with this timeline and everything, again, the Holocaust Encyclopedia at the United States Holocaust Museum, our colleagues there did a wonderful job kind of making a giant long essay about this timeline too, if you want to review that and get more detail. So let's talk about Theresienstadt, right? Here at the museum, we call Theresienstadt the 3-in-1 camp. It is unique. It is like no other camp. It is like no other SS location in Nazi-occupied Europe. And the reason I say that is there's many unique locations, but this one is really unique in the sense that it is operated by the SS. It is unique as an SS-operated campsite, and there's really no pinpointing, really, even if you look under the structure of the Nazi-operated camps, where Theresienstadt exactly falls under. And even the Nazis in their definitions under their structure will switch around a lot of times where Theresienstadt actually fits. And that becomes that 3-in-1 camp that we talk about because it has 3 functions that operate as one location. First, it's a ghetto, mainly serving Czech Jews, just like ghettos in Poland, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's a transit or deportation camp, like some of the big camps in the West, like Drancy near Paris, Westerbork for the Netherlands, and it will serve like that, serve in that capacity too. And then it's this resettlement camp, and that's what it's officially defined as a resettlement, which falls under the umbrella of the concentration camps. And so you get this weird 3-in-1 mix, but they're all, you can see this is the map of what we call the big fortress of Theresienstadt. There's a little fortress too, or a little camp as well, which was mainly a prison and a kind of almost like a torture area too, and a very specific prison camp area too with it. But this is the larger part. You see it's the structure of an old fortress right here. That's why it has those weird shapes at the end on the map on it. But all of it functioned in all of these different ways, quite frequently at it. I also want you to look at this map too, the uniqueness. Now, Theresienstadt is not unique that it is a fortress that is turned into a camp. There's several other camps that are turned, that were fortresses before, or were functioned as military barracks before. In my home country of Belgium, one of our largest fortresses, Breendonk, was turned into a concentration camp, and one of our main military barracks was turned into a deportation camp in Mechelen. They're not as pretty looking as this. There is this, even the building structure, the original fortress structure, you just look at it, there is this really nice geometric shapes when you look at the map of it, and it continues as they're more reinforcing in it. So much so that in some of the earlier references of Heydrich wanting to pick a location, he looked at some of these platforms and said, there's already like this nice geometric, nice shapes to it. And so this would be a great site. It's a great location. It's very central. So this element where Heydrich is going to think about this as a propaganda camp is already at the very origin of the looks and feels of this as well. And so that's why I like to show this map too. I did that with my college students too, is like, think about the deeper thinking behind it of why this becomes that site, right? It all interconnects together. Okay. Again, if you have questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A and I'll address them. So let's talk about Theresienstadt as the camp ghetto. it exists for 3.5 years between November um, of really 1941 to May of 1945. That's how it's going to really operate as a camp. Now, when we think of Theresienstadt, we usually see, and I'm going to fast forward. We usually think about this. We usually think about the films we see about Theresienstadt, the gardens, everything. This is the reality of Theresienstadt. And there's more pictures out there, but I wanted to pick some of the main images in here. When you think of the true Theresienstadt, you think of the lines, you think about the overcrowding, you think about the forced labor, you think about the horrible conditions. If you hear descriptions of the true Theresienstadt by survivors, especially before the Red Cross visit, there is starvation, disease, because there was barely anything provided for Jews in Theresienstadt. And if you look at these images, these images will more remind you of a ghetto, of images that you might see of Warsaw or Łódź or Krakow ghetto, than it will of maybe a Buchenwald or a Dachau. Whereas if we look at images of this, you might more get the concentration camp vibes. This is on purpose, right? And so I want you to think the original kind of structure before really the Nazis start building towards the Red Cross visit. This is what Theresienstadt is going to look like. And for most of Theresienstadt, this is what the prisoners are experiencing in there with it. So first of all, it is built as a ghetto, just like the ghettos in Poland, serving Czech Jews, meaning Czech Jews would be deported here. And then there would be a Judenrat formed that would oversee the holding of Jews before, just like in the ghettos in Poland and in occupied Soviet Union and Lithuania. Those Jews would be moved from there to other locations with that as well, like the death camps or sent to shootings by the Einsatzgruppe. So those plans were more firmer and put in place to move Jews to other locations. And so it's actually interesting that the Czech Jewish leadership in their original meetings and from documents that we can see, preferred the establishment of Theresienstadt and a ghetto because the Jews in the Czech provinces of Czechoslovakia had already faced 6 deportations. Deportation to Łódź, to Brno ghetto, and they preferred having a ghetto in the Czech provinces at Terezín and creating a Theresienstadt ghetto versus Czech Jews being deported out of Czechoslovakia to Poland. They felt safer if they could keep their own people, if they could keep Czech Jews within Czechoslovakia. And so it is originally, out of the horrible choices that Czech Jewish leadership had, they preferred this pathway. And that really helped the Nazis in establishing a Judenrat at Theresienstadt as well. The first head of the Judenrat became Jacob Edelstein, who really, almost in a sense, very similar to leadership in Łódź, wanted to build this concept of Theresienstadt being a very independent, self-sustaining, productive community with the ultimate goal of preventing deportation. That was the goal of Edelstein. And a lot of everything that is going to be built around that is around that idea of Theresienstadt being a self-sustaining, productive community. Of course, the reality was quite different, right? It is these harsh conditions. And the reality, too, is that Theresienstadt wasn't just a ghetto. And it never was just a ghetto in the eyes of the Nazis. It was also a transit camp. And it was frequently marked by the Nazis as a transit camp, which means that they used it as this kind of deportation place continuously, meaning that Jews from the Czech provinces, from Germany, from Austria, from the Netherlands would arrive here just to be collected here and be deported here. That's the function of a transit camp. These transit camps, I always say, they're holding pins to fill up trains to send to the death camps. And that's what Theresienstadt functioned at as well. And so for the Jewish leadership at Theresienstadt, it was this continuous battle between ghetto and transit camp. And again, that creates that uniqueness too that you see. And so you see a lot of movement in of people and this influx continuously as well, going back and forward at Theresienstadt as well. Just to kind of give you some data behind there, the Germans deported 60,382 Czech Jews through Theresienstadt to the death camps. That's a lot. That means Theresienstadt literally was for Czech Jews a holding pin to send them to the death camps. And so that's that duality here, that Theresienstadt is both a ghetto, but it is also a deportation camp. Because it's not just German Czech Jews, right? Between November 41 and April 45, the Germans approximately sent about 73,900 Jews from Theresienstadt from Czechoslovakia throughout to many of the different sites, not just the death camps, but other ghettos and other mass killing sites as well. So that's really hard to comprehend, these numbers, that fluctuation. It's a lot of different groups, a lot of different population that are coming together here in this very Central European area, and from there are kind of spread out again. I wanted to add one more data point in here as well, is the fact of the ghetto and the horrible conditions in the ghetto as well, is that on top of all these deportation points is Jews were dying in Theresienstadt too. Out of the Czech Jews for which this ghetto was built, 6,152 Jews died here at Theresienstadt in this ghetto. You know, the conditions were really, really difficult. So one of the questions was, I'm seeing here sewing industry photos. Yes, so there was different factories attached to Theresienstadt. Some of them even were in Theresienstadt as well. And the Judenrat definitely encouraged that, is right. They wanted Theresienstadt to have some productive element to it. And this is where Theresienstadt looks like other ghettos have that too. They, you know, Lodz is famous for having all of these different workshops with it as well. So Theresienstadt had a lot of sewing industry, some armament industry as well, welding industry, all of that at Theresienstadt as well. So multiple different industries, as well as workshops within Theresienstadt, and just some of them just located out of Theresienstadt. And you can see that as well. You can see, of course, the sleeping conditions. One of the bottom middle picture is the women's barracks, the photo into the women's barracks. The photo on the right is one of the arrival areas where these are actually judged Jews are arriving and are about to be sorted to go into the barracks, and the chaos just with that. And then the endless food lines. What you see, the image in the middle is these endless food lines is to get some kind of food with it as well. The photo on the left is actually a photo for me on the left, kind of middle bottom, is kind of the cleaning condition, is the showers and where clothes were washed and dried in that. So those were the conditions where women were doing some kind of form of laundry in the camp. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the facade that the Nazis are setting, right? The third part of Theresienstadt is this spy retirement community or the resettlement camp, as the Nazis call it. This element of propaganda and deception that Theresienstadt is known for. So officially on the records, Theresienstadt is established for German, Austrian, and Czech Jews who are over the age of 65 and who are disabled or highly decorated World War I veterans. Why? Germany and Austria had quite a few, enough that it is a percentage of Jews who fought in World War I, who were decorated. And if your whole pitch as Nazis is we're defeated by the Jews, but these Jews fought in World War I and they supported us and they're very dedicated to the German military and they're decorated and they fought for our motherland, defended our motherland. And now you're saying that they're the reason that you lost, it kind of contradicts your whole thing, and it will make people upset because you don't want to send these highly decorated or even just World War I veterans into concentration camps. It's not the thing that your population usually likes. And so it's a way of kind of pacifying the German and Austrian population by saying, hey, they are not going to a camp, these veterans. They are being moved to this spy retirement community. So they're segregated from the community, but they're treated really well. It's a spa town, right? And that is the image with it. Oh, and this is the concept that Heydrich is creating for. In reality, while Heydrich is alive, very few of this group are going to go to Theresienstadt because mainly Czech Jews are going there. Moms with children, elderly, young, they're definitely not World War I veterans or people with disabilities who are going to Theresienstadt. The third bullet point happens after Heydrich dies. They add this element, and this is because now, think about this time, right? This is after the Wannsee Conference. They know the death camps are coming. The death camps are now online, and people are starting to look at them. The Red Cross, the World Jewish Congress, the United States, Britain, everybody's starting to, reports are coming out of these death camps, and now they need another kind of cover, a new cover, right? Not just for these military veterans, but for this spot town. And the third bullet point gets added is regional, national, international celebrities that could cause inquiry. And this is where we're going to see some of the famous artists, intellectuals, the Leo Bachs arriving at Theresienstadt as well. And that's where the big wave is going to come with the German or Austrian Jews with it too. Then the next thing is the infamous Red Cross visit, right? So, and I want to go into that a little bit too, because it's really key in all of this, how this intellectual and cultural resistance is built. There's the Red Cross visit, and then there's the Red Cross visits. What most people don't know is that the June 1944 Red Cross visit is not the first Red Cross visit. It is actually the second Red Cross visit. In June of 1943, a year before that, the German Red Cross, or the Deutschen Red Cross, had already visited Theresienstadt. It was led by Walter George Hartmann and the German Foreign Ministry official Ebert von Taden. They were there because the International Red Cross and the German Red Cross had been sending food parcels to Theresienstadt, and there had been communication that those food parcels were disappearing. And they were questioning the conditions added. Now, let me be very clear. The German Red Cross is not the International Red Cross. They are a Nazified Red Cross. They are the German Red Cross, aka we're under the Nazis' Red Cross. That is very different, right? Still, when the report came back from Hartmann, he described overcrowding, harsh conditions. He called the conditions so dreadful that he couldn't believe any of the prisoners were surviving. He said all of the prisoners were immensely undernourished and no adequate medical care was being provided in his report. This report leaked to the International Red Cross. Probably Hartman was one of those upstanders that is walked the blurred lines of survival and being an upstander and likely leaked it out because he knew that the International Red Cross had suspicions that there were death camps. And he knew if this report would leak out, that if the conditions were this bad at Theresienstadt, they were probably even worse at Auschwitz. So why did the June 1944 Red Cross visit happen? First of all, the Red Cross had gotten reports, the International Red Cross had gotten multiple reports by the end of 1943 that Auschwitz existed and that Auschwitz was a death camp. And they feared the existence of these death camps, and they were investigating Germany because of that. On top of that, the Danish Red Cross, under the pressure of King Christian X, really wanted to check on the 450 Danish Jews who were at Theresienstadt because King Christian feared that they were going to be deported to Auschwitz and be murdered there. And he wanted to health check on them. And so this combination led to pressure on a visit in the request came in November of 1943. And the visit only happened in June of 1943. So the Nazis had plenty of time to prepare, to clean up, to beautify. And this is what we see, right? First of all, in May of 1944, right before the Red Cross visit, they deported 7,500 Jews to Auschwitz just to make it less crowded, right? I know that seems so harsh, but that was the easiest solution right there to start the beautification. Then the planting of flowers. We can see some of that evidence still in the footage of some of the propaganda films from Auschwitz. The building of stores, of a coffee house, a bank, a school, kindergartners, the rehousing of all the Danish Jews into a special area that was cleansed. Because remember, right, one of the highlights was checking on the Danish Jews. And then some of those few prominent prisoners, they were rehoused as well. Then the visit happened. The visit was led by the International Red Cross. They sent a very young and inexperienced Maurice Rossell. It was his first site visit ever. He had just been part of the International Red Cross. He was on purpose picked because they could blame everything on his inexperience if they needed to. And then the Danish Minister of Health went, and the Danish Foreign Minister went as well on the visit. It was an 8-hour tour on a predetermined path through Theresienstadt, in which they heard the famous speeches, the speech by Epstein, in which he talked. He was one of the head of the Judenrat, and he talked about how Theresienstadt was a normal town. Epstein was driven in by a limo with the SS holding a gun behind his head, and then got out of the limo. Epstein appeared in the speech, in the video of the speech, with a black eye because the SS beat him up before, saying, if you don't read this speech that we want you to read, we will kill you. And here's a black eye just to make sure you'll remember that during your speech. So they beat him up beforehand with it. And so he arrived. You can see some on some of the film footage with literally his eye is all swollen and bruised with that. And of course, they watched the infamous soccer game, the children playing it. These are some of the images right there from the International Red Cross that you see right here. Guards, Jewish police were dressed up in these gorgeous uniforms and stationed throughout Theresienstadt to show that it was all Jewish police. The children performed the Brundi performance. Everything was a show. The result was the report was favorable. It didn't talk about overcrowding. It didn't talk about medical issues. It didn't talk about malnutrition. And it had no report of deportations because the committee never saw that. They only saw this. And the report, most importantly, brought into question if Auschwitz and the death camps existed. Now, the report came back as any good report, it was leaked again. This time it was leaked by somebody within the International Red Cross to the World Jewish Congress, who immediately protested this report. At the same time, the Auschwitz Protocols came out. If you don't know the Auschwitz Protocols, this is a document that provides evidence and facts and descriptions of Auschwitz and the murders going on of Jews at Auschwitz by two Jews who escaped Auschwitz and ran away. One of them who was a Slovak Jew. So, so on top of it, they're Jews from this area who escaped Auschwitz, who are now bringing back evidence in a report that this is happening. Of course, that invalidates, of course, the Red Cross visits and immediately starts new calls for the Red Cross to visit Theresienstadt. This is why we have so many visits of the Red Cross repeatedly happening in 44 and 45 again, because the Red Cross then starts visiting. So long story short, this one visit is the propaganda visit, but it continues on from here with several other, especially the Danish Red Cross is going to come by several times to check on the Danish Jews as well. On top of that, of course, two very infamous propaganda films are made at Theresienstadt. One, the Ghetto Theresienstadt film, which comes out in 42. The Nazis make it, and then Himmler doesn't like it, so they shove it in a drawer. This first film follows the story of the Hollander family through Theresienstadt to show really that people of Jewish origin are transferred to a Jewish ghetto and their integration into the camp structure. But Himmler thought it was too harsh. So a second film was recorded that was tied to the Red Cross visit. Of course, a perfect time to film Theresienstadt. And it would show as Eichmann, who was in charge of creating this film, and it was all created on the wishes of Eichmann, that Terezín was this beautified town that showed the happy life in the ghetto. Many editions later, the film eventually came out in 44 under the title The Führer Gives Jews a City. It was only screened a few times, but we do know that Eichmann was one of the first viewers of the film, and that Karl Frank, the Secretary of State of Bohemia and Moravia, basically Czechoslovakia, was also one of the first viewers in it. Most of the people seen in the film of The Führer Gives Jews a City were sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau and murdered upon arrival. And that is really, truly the lasting legacy of that film, is not what is shown in there, but the true reality behind the film. So quickly on that, those deportations, what is important in this whole narrative as we're talking is that Jews are arriving and leaving Theresienstadt nonstop. Czech Jews, Slovak Jews, German Jews, Austrian Jews, Dutch Jews, Danish Jews, and then the prisoners from Gross-Rosen and Buchenwald. We have a mix. The centrality of Theresienstadt creates into that addition, and the incoming, outcoming, that usual influx creates what will become the life of resistance. So that defiance. That's why we're truly here, right? And that's the true heroism about Theresienstadt right here, the true upstander behavior we see. I call it defiance. And we often talk about resistance as active resistance, picking up a weapon and fighting back. But when you're faced as a people, or when you're interned in a ghetto, that's not always an option or a solution. Survival becomes more important than maybe going on an armed suicide mission with that. And it isn't an option anymore. And that's what the Jews at Theresienstadt really well understood. Defiance is also not passive resistance. I really don't like that word, passive resistance, because defiance has a huge impact. And it did at Theresienstadt too. Defiance is a form of nonconformism, is not wanting to follow the path that is set for you. It opposes the dehumanization that is set for you. It fights back against that. And that is huge in the larger picture of the ability to survive under this immense oppression and the conditions that Jews were living. It is the opportunity of documentation. And this is the the gem that we get out of Theresienstadt's resistance is the documentation. We know so much about Theresienstadt because they made an effort to document it through the life of Jews and how Jews views Theresienstadt. And that is heroism right there. That is pure defiance right there. That is resistance in its essence. The goals of this resistance overall was to elevate life under the difficult circumstances and affirm the humanity of Jewish life at Theresienstadt. What began as Nazi propaganda tool became a weapon of intellectual and spiritual defiance for all the Jews at Theresienstadt. And that is the legacy of Theresienstadt. There was an immense religious life. While prisoners came from all backgrounds, many of them brought many religious items, Torah scrolls, shafars, tefillin. All of this was preserved. Edelstein especially appointed a team of rabbis to make sure that there was makeshift areas for prayer on Shabbat, but also rabbis that ministered to non-Jews. Jews had converted to Christianity who were at Theresienstadt as well because of Nuremberg laws, to educate them on Jewish life as well, although they didn't see themselves necessarily as Jews anymore, but they were marked by the Nazis as Jews. So all of this Judaism became a big component with that as well. Theresienstadt became a university. It had a library with over 60,000 books that came over time and was built up. 10,000 of them were in Hebrew. That's quite a remarkable collection. 15 librarians full-time worked at this library to keep it up. And this is part of this larger mission, right, is of this productive community. This productive community wasn't just about labor in these workshops, but also as librarians and in these different fields, as academics in lectures. The Open University system created lectures, more than 2,300 lectures were given on topics such as science and language and history. I want to give you this example of Moses Moskin Nertabi. He was a Zionist, and he had visited Eretz Israel, and he had established his own Hebrew school already in Leipzig. When he was deported to Theresienstadt with his wife and daughter, he immediately started teaching Hebrew, but he also started teaching Arabic with this mission. If we can survive this and we go to Eretz Israel, we need these different languages. And so he was translating Hebrew to Arabic and working and teaching this and all of these different facets with the element of survival in its essence too. A youth welfare office was established. This divided the children by language and provided schooling to them. About 200 to 300 children were assigned in these rooms by gender and age, and they were taught in elements of Zionism, preparation for a life in Eretz Israel, and also some communist ideology as well with that too, but also Hebrew studies, Talmudic studies, all of that under that umbrella as well. A question was, were these lectures overseen by the Nazis? Yes, the Nazis did that. This was official. There was lists coming out, but again, this was contained to it. And the Nazis allowed this because they approved this. And I'm going to actually, this is a great segue in here. They approved this department. It became known as the Freizeitgestaltung. Is the free time department. And actually the Open University fell under that as well. It was under the permission of the SS that the Judenrat established this administration of leisurely activities. And these were cultural programs. And the SS believes that this would pacify the population at Theresienstadt with it as well. So there was some censorship, and I'm going to talk about this in just a little bit, but overall they gave them some element of free reign. with that as well. Some of the books arrived that were hidden in some of the underground in the libraries. Some of it was destroyed with it. A lot of that now is in the Jewish History Museum at Prague. Amazing collection there. Go visit Prague. And go visit that museum too with it as well. I'm going through some of the questions that are coming into the chat as well. So yes, Jews were allowed to bring books, Torahs, and articles with them to Theresienstadt, and that's what built the collection, right? The collection was built by items and books that Jews brought with them to Theresienstadt with it as well. So quite a unique collection there. Probably one of the uniquest libraries in the world that existed at that point with that. So this Freizeitgesellschaft organized a lot of the different activities from the lectures to all of the art that was accomplished as well under this umbrella of art as survival. And this is really important, right? One of the things it did is it connected people with each other to set up classes and workshops. One of these connections, and it's probably my favorite, we had a traveling exhibit that came in on it a few years ago at the museum, is on Videm. And you can see the Videm 4445. It's one of the newspaper coverage. Videm was a newspaper published by 13 to 16-year-old boys. It was all in Czech. About 800 pages survive today that were placed in hiding and survived Theresienstadt. The main editor was a young man named Peter Gins, who was just amazing. Look him up. He's just an amazing young man who was invited by his teacher, Walt Eisinger, to start writing. And Eisinger gave these boys the inspiration of Jules Verne and hope for the future to inspire these boys to write. And so they did. They drew and they write. And a lot of the themes are about rockets and space and freedom and getting out and expressions. They wrote, this was undercover newsletter, right? This was not out in the open. This was a newsletter that was passed around. But they wrote bad about the Nazis. They wrote about what was going on. They were expressing themselves. And that's what Eisinger wanted, right? He wanted these young boys to be able to talk and express themselves in the conditions of Theresienstadt. The boys got their own art supplies with it. They found an abandoned typewriter. And they issued on that typewriter their first 30 issues. The next 53 were made by hand after the typewriter ran out of ink. Which just shows the conditions and the inspirations and things that they came on. They worked on a wooden table in their bunk room. And so when they held guard one at a time, so when the guards approached, they would alert each other, they would clean everything up, and then would come back together. Friedel Dicker Brandeis, you see some of the drawings of the children here, was an amazing artist who, once she arrived at Theresienstadt, refused to make art, but instead she started a school for the children to draw art and really pushed them to express themselves. Many of the sketches of the children still survive today. There's an amazing book, and I Never Saw Another Butterfly, that contains the collection of Brandeis's children's drawings from there. There was a group of artists who were the arts department under the Freigestaltung. And I have some of their images right there. You can see one of the drawings of the concerts right there, and a drawing, I think Peter Keen's is the piano, and the other one is Leah Haas on top. I always mix them up, which one is the one artist with it as well. But famous artists like Norbert Toller, Leo Haas, Peter Keen were part of this. They named them, the Nazis actually eventually went after them and claimed that all of the art created by this department was atrocity propaganda. All of the artists were caught, were arrested, were sent to the small camp at Theresienstadt and tortured for weeks before they were released, and most of them were sent to Auschwitz to be murdered there. Then we have the famous composers, right? We have Victor Ullmann, who produced Der Kaiser from Atlantis. Karl Svenk, who wrote a Theresian March. Hans Krause, who had already developed Wunderbar, but held the children, and there's a picture right here of the children at the end of their performance of Brundibar, which was also a mockery in its essence of the Nazis too, how they used it as well. Karl Unser, who delivered us the famous Defiant Requiem, which I hope you all go watch and experience too and learn about more. Pavel Haas, Gideon Klein. I know there's going to be some more sessions that are going to dive into that too. All of them used their music to inspire survival, strength to overcome the dehumanization, but also to leave messages for the world today. The documentation of this is what Theresienstadt was truly like. The children did through their newsletters, through their drawings. The music that we have today through Defiant Requiem and Brundibar, the images we have from Klein and others who really depict the life, they're little breadcrumbs that they left for us to tell the truth. And that is heroism and resistance in its own. That is the true art behind what was done at Theresienstadt. So I have 5 minutes left. I thought I was going to have 10 minutes left. I'm sorry. I'll take other questions. I saw some other questions come in, and I think I answered already several of them. Yeah, somebody asked, I know the scores to Verdi were brought in. Yes, also all of what became the Brundibar opera, that Krasa brought all of that with him as well. So a lot of composers brought elements with them into Theresienstadt. It depended how the deportations happened. Let me just go back to that deportation. Notice the top right here on my deportation slide is some of the German deportees. Now, notice how it's orderly done. Look at the train station too. The ones in the snow are the Czech prisoners, the Czech Jewish prisoners. Not so pleasant deportation, right? Endless marches to get to Theresienstadt in the cold. They usually the Czech prisoners brought a lot less with them, whereas the German and Austrian prisoners were able to bring more with them. So I wanted to kind of show you that element of the ability to bring too, but yes. And that makes Theresienstadt unique. So prayer books to fill in, all of that were brought into Theresienstadt and were really well kept in the library or used. Again, the appointed rabbis make sure too that all the religious items were really well protected too. Some of it was hidden. For example, the children's drawings were hidden by the artist herself, so she could, by Friedel Dicker Bryce, to protect them and hope that they would survive. Some of them were sent out of Theresienstadt as well. Some of the famous artists would smuggle in some of their artwork and letters out to the Red Cross, to other elements too. So one of the questions was, were they able to have services? Yes, again, they made these makeshift services, Minyan, Shabbat, and that was led by that appointed group of rabbis by the Judenrate, which is a little different than some of the ghettos where that all had to happen underground. You're welcome to take a picture of this slide. These are some big resources too. That encyclopedia article gives that big list, and it has a lot of links about cultural life. I love the learning environments at Yad Vashem. They're very unique. They're more inspired for young people, but sometimes we like to learn through young people's visions too. So I actually really personally, as an adult, like those learning environments too. The Vedem, they have a lot of the letters and the original copies online, and it's like a group that works to teach students today about the Vedem newsletter. So that's a great way. And then make sure you visit the Terezín Memorial site too. It's amazing as well. And I know you're going to get a lot more about Defiant Requiem, so I'm not going to cover that too much.
Hi, honey.
Charlotte,
Hello.
thank you. Thank you
You're
so
very
much
welcome.
for such a moving and informative lecture today. We are so incredibly grateful for your giving of your time today. And we are, as we close up today, a reminder to please, if you have not already, please purchase your tickets to see the Defiant Requiem. You can purchase your tickets on the Dallas Symphony Orchestra website. And also, please join us next week. We are going to be, the session is called Tune into Text, and we're going to explore the text and meaning of the Verdi Requiem with Dr. Galit Gertzensen. She's an expert on music and the Holocaust from Ball State University. So please join us next week. She's actually also on the call with us today. So Galit maybe can give a little wave. There she is. So Galit will be our teacher next week, and it promises to be an incredible session. So same link at noon next week. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much for joining us today. And Charlotte, thank you so much. Thank you. And
Thank
thanks
you.
to Tal.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you.